Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's your boy Worm here. How'd you like that intro? And today, of course, we are on our last episode of exotic change that I feel like should happen. Of course, we are starting on the Hunter. Now, I saved Hunter for the last one for two reasons. Number one, I don't play Hunter very often. So I only use a couple exotics. But number two, the reason I only use a couple exotic is because hunters, in my opinion, have the biggest disparity between great pieces of armor and pieces of armor that need a lot of work. So yeah, without further ado, let's talk about all these exotics, which I don't have two of them. I don't have Blight Ranger because we'll talk about that when we get there. And I don't have Radiant Dance Machines because we'll talk about that when I get there as well. Starting out, Knucklehead Radar. All right. Knucklehead Radar, upgraded sensor pack, provides radar while you're aiming and enhances your radar resolution while crouched. This is definitely a PvP based exotic. 100%. Now, the effect that it gives you is very good, and this is, as you can see here by this icon, this was one of the original Destiny 2 exotics that came with the game. So most of these, again, have very simple effects. Radar while you're aiming, enhances radar resolution while you're crouched. Very simple. Unfortunately, it's a little bit too basic. We have too many strong contenders. So how would we upgrade the Knucklehead Radar to be better? And of course, it plays into the idea of radar and tracking. I would almost say a cool idea would be to give your radar enhanced range and then give your radar tracking capabilities. Like if you damage a target, it doesn't track them through walls, but you can see on the radar exactly where they are. I also think that the next thing is that the enhanced radar should not just be while you're crouched, it should be all the time. And I think that'd be a really good change to this. You'd probably see it come into the fold a little bit more. Again, in PvP, you wouldn't really see it in PvE because it's not a PvE designed exotic. So yeah, I would enhance the radar constantly, not just when you are crouched. And then I would also have a feature where, like, when you damage a target, it marks them on the radar and extend that radar range. Okay, I would say double the radar range. You know, if you see red on the outer ring of the radar, that means they're however far away, which maybe that could be troublesome because it might cover like the entire map basically. Or perhaps, no, perhaps this, instead of doing that, perhaps make a change to where there's three, of course, in the radar there are three like segments. There's the middle circle, which is enemies within 5 meters of you. There's that middle part, which is enemies up to or between the 5 meters, or is it 10? 5 or 10 meters, and then 64, I believe. And then 64 to, I can't remember what it is, like 80, maybe not 80. I can't remember, but it's from, I think, 64 up to a certain amount. Enemies are off the radar. I say with this helmet, add an additional like kind of circle within that middle area, right? So that if enemies are within, say, 30 meters of you, they show up in the bottom part of the radar. And then if enemies are between that 30 and 64, then they're in the top part. That way it gives people it gives a hunter a better sense of, okay, the enemies are this close. Pardon me. The enemies are this close, or they're this far away. I think that if you made that change, hell, that change alone, you would see a pretty substantial uptick. I'm sorry, in the amount of usage you see of this exotic in PvP. But yeah, first change, I would say separate the radar into 4 segments instead of 3. Number 1. Number 2, enhance the radar so that all the time, not just while you're crouched. And then actually, no, I think those 2 would probably be good. I think that marking an enemy would be too much. Marking an enemy on the radar, mind you, on the radar, would be a little bit too much. So yeah, I think that just increasing enhancing the radar all the time, and then adding an additional segment in there for just more information would be a good change. They could potentially see this come up more in PvP. Again, it's not a bad PvP exotic, it's just there are better options. On to Celestial Nighthawk. Okay, Hawkeye Hack. Modifies Golden Gun to fire a single high damage shot. Enemies eliminated by the shot explode and grant you super energy. So basically, you get one shot with Golden Gun that deals, I think, 6 or 7 times normal damage of Golden Gun. Most people use this on or with the 3-shooter. That way they can hit precision damage and deal just a massive amount of damage. I think this is one of those ones. Okay, number one, it is a super base exotic, so it's only working when you have your super. And number two, I think that Golden Gun is just not really a viable. No, I shouldn't say viable. Not always the best option in PvE activities. But let's start off with the fact that it's super only. Let's figure out something to add on here to make it not super only. And I think that potentially a good change for that to fill in the role of the Hawkeye, aka good aim, make it so that precision throwing knife kills grant additional super energy. I think that would be a wonderful change, because then you could potentially have a situation where somebody could throw throwing knives with the weighted throwing knife, get a precision kill. It gives them more super energy. They can chain that over and over again, have their golden gun back very quickly with that one big damage shot. Yeah, I mean, as I sit here and think about that, I think that would probably be one of the best changes for it, because then of course you compare that with I forget the name of the embers, but the one that makes you radiant when you hit a melee kill. I would also say you could add an additional functionality so that whenever you get a precision kill with a throwing knife, you are granted your melee ability back, or not your not your melee ability back, your class ability, your dodge back. Obviously you're gonna get your melee ability back, but yeah, I mean, I think that those would be some optimal changes, because again, this exotic it's not bad. It is not bad by any means. It's just that it's based around a super only, and it is based around a super that's not as many people use. I feel like, especially right now, Gathering Storm and Tether are the two primary supers you see in PvE right now. So yeah, the only change I'd make to this, of course, precision throwing knife kills grant additional super energy, and then precision throwing knife kills also grant give your dodge ability back. And that'd be the change I'd make for Celestial Nighthawk. Let's go on to Fotracer. Now, Fotracer at one point was a very, very popular exotic, and for good reason. Its perk here, Relentless Tracker, visually marks targets, deals more damage to low health marked targets, provides a small benefit to airborne effectiveness to all weapons. So this is basically kind of a, more or less kind of a tracker style helmet. It's not unlike the Knucklehead Radar, but this one has a different role. So this one, number one, it visually marks targets. Basically, when you damage, or no, I haven't used this in so long, so I don't want to get it wrong here. Not when you damage target, but when you look at a target for X amount of time, it will visually mark them through walls. This used to be a really strong effect because it would mark them for like a very long time. Now it doesn't mark them very long at all. I think it's like 5 seconds or something like that. It also deals more damage to low health marked targets. So first of all, the additional damage to low health marked targets is absolutely like sad. It's like 10 or 15%, if I'm not mistaken. I could be totally wrong in that. But last I heard, it was really, really low. And it's only really going to be effective against bosses, if you think about it. In the Crucible, 90% of your weapons are not going to benefit from dealing additional damage to low health targets. And I think that would be a good place to start with the change. I would say instead of dealing more damage to low health marked targets, I would say just deal more damage to marked targets. Basically, when you damage a marked targets, they suffer from the weakened effect, for example, from you. So, you know, you see somebody, you lock onto them, you chase them into the into an area. All of a sudden, you know, they're not at a disadvantage, they're not slowed or anything like that, but they are taking 15% more damage from you. I feel like that would be an optimal change. Oh, I forgot to mention, this is more of a PvP exotic. I would definitely say that. But yeah, I think that just dealing more damage to marked targets would be beneficial. That would be the most beneficial change that this can receive. Also, the visual marking, I think that it should last a little bit longer. I'd say like 10 seconds. And then every time you see your target, every time you get like your reticle within a certain, you know, angle of the enemy, it refreshes that timer. That way you could with this helmet, you could literally be a relentless tracker, as it says here on screen. I mean, I think that would possibly be the best. I think that would be the best option for it. That way, you know, and I would actually, another thing I would say, another small detail, whenever you are, whenever you're in pursuit, somehow Bungie could do this. I know they can, but whenever you are in pursuit of the marked target, you move faster. For example, like when you have an enemy marked, you move 10% faster, or something like that. That way you could chase them down. They couldn't just run away. But yeah, I think that would suffice for the Fotracer to bring it up to something a lot better. And I think if you did that, you would see this way more present in something like Trials, especially those 3v3 game modes. But yeah, in terms of the visually marking targets, visually mark them for 10 seconds, and then that mark refreshes every time you can like get in like you can see them with your weapon within a certain cone angle of your weapon. Number one. Number two, I think the enemy should be notified when they're marked and when they're being tracked. Like literally give like an icon, you know, in the bottom screen that says tracked or something like that. That way they know. That way they can run and try to break line of sight. But yeah, every time that the hunter gets, you know, sight of the enemy, again, they're refreshed. That 10-second timer is refreshed. And you know what I would also say as a balancing factor, on the enemy's HUD, the tracked actually has the timer for how long they're tracked for. That way, you know, if you're running and it says, "Oh, I'm tracked," okay, like I've got to, you know, get to safety, right? Then you're in safety and you see that timer refresh to 10. That means you know that you're within that hunter's sight, so you can again continue to run around, and that would kind of fit the fit the role of this being a cat and mouse style helmets. I think that'd be a good idea. In terms of the dealing damage to low health targets, just take out the low health. Just change it to deal more damage to marked targets. That way, when you track somebody and chase them down, you are at an advantage to kill them. And yeah, that's Fotracer. That would be the changes that I would make to it. Let's move on to the next one. Graviton forfeit. Okay, so Graviton forfeit is actually one of my most used exotics on Hunter. And I absolutely love Graviton forfeits. So its perk here, Vanishing Shadow, increases the duration of any invisibility effects. While you are invisible, your melee recharges faster, your weapons reload faster, and your recovery is greatly increased. Basically, if I'm not mistaken, it gives you what is in essence a 9.5 recovery. And I say 9.5 because it's faster than tier 9 recovery, but it's slower than tier 10. So it's like, you know, kind of in the middle there. But of course, melee recharges faster and your weapons reload faster. This is one, it can really function in PvE and PvP, and it really fits a very certain build. And the very certain build that it fits, of course, is a build that utilizes invisibility heavily. The only change I think I would really make to this, like from a realistic standpoint here, is in the Crucible, your melee does not charge nearly as fast as it should, in my opinion. I think that your melee should charge a little bit faster in the Crucible. But in PvE, I mean, that melee is back in like 5 seconds. At tier 10 strength, your melee is literally back in 5 seconds. So you can go, you know, do a dodge. You can, when your dodge is about to run out, you go down, smoke out, stay invisible for, you know, 11 seconds, dodge again. You can literally be invisible 24/7. If you don't want to shoot, you can stay invisible for the entire duration of a strike or something like that, which is very, very strong. This is a great exotic to use in PvE, you know, especially in high level content for, you know, revives and capping flags or capping zones, stuff like that in PvE. But I think the only thing is that your melee needs to recharge faster in PvP. Other than that, I really think that everything is okay in here. The only other thing I might add is that while you're invisible, you sprint faster. Give it something similar to, like, you know, while you're invisible, you get like the amplified sprint speed. And yeah, this helmet is it's in a really good spot. It's a shame more people don't use it, but I think that it's really good where it is. And if people start realizing how deadly it is, or how good it is, especially in like solo runs or something like that, you will you'll see more of it happen. But yeah, that's Graviton forfeits. Okay, Wormhus Crown. Now this one is one of the ones that's super popular, and unfortunately it has a very simple has a very simple effect. Burning Souls. Dodging gives you a small health and shield bump. So back in the day, for those of y'all who may not have played in Warmind, this helmet was insane because every time you dodge, you would start health regeneration. Well, the issue, of course, is when you dodge, you break aim assistance, so players couldn't hit you. And if you're running tier 10 recovery, you can be back at full health in literally 2 seconds. And then in that 2 seconds, of course, you don't have any sort of what's it called? Aim assistance on you. How would I go about changing this? I think that this one is kind of stuck in an awkward position because there's not much else you can change about it. It does something very simple here, but it is so generally useful. I would say the one thing I would change about it, because it's such a widely used exotic, I would say that when you have this exotic equipped, your dodge cooldown is automatically increased. That way you can't get your dodge back in the, you know, at tier 10 mobility. I think it's 12 or 14 seconds with a marksman dodge, of course. Increase that to 18. Increase marksman dodge to like 24, something like that at tier 10 mobility. That way you can't have, it's not as strong. You don't have that as readily available, but it still gives you that benefit. This again, I would say, is more of a PvP style exotic because you just don't see it in PvE, and it's really not all that great in PvE. But yeah, I think that's really the only change you can make, is increasing the dodge ability cooldown with this exotic equipped. Let's go on to Assassin's Cowl. Okay, so Assassin's Cowl, this is a very fun exotic. Very fun, and it is a very good exotic. And I would say currently it is definitely very high in the meta. Exotic perk here, Vanishing Execution. Powered melee final blows grant invisibility and restore a portion of health and shields. Finishers and final blows against more powerful targets increase the duration of invisibility and the amount of shields and health restored. So this helmet is not, in my opinion, an issue because of its actual, like, because of anything about it here. It's more popular because of Arc 3.0 and the fact that in Arc 3.0 you can have an insanely powerful melee damage build that you can take into in-game. So again, I think that really this is in a decent spot. Powered melee final blows grant invisibility and restore a portion of health and shields. That is kind of that's in a good spot. I really think that that's in a good spot. And then finishers and final blows against more powerful targets increase the duration of invisibility and the amount of health and shields restored. Again, I think that's also perfectly acceptable. The idea of this, of course, is you know, you're playing as an assassin. You know, you go and you finish an enemy, you get health, shields, and invis. so that you can get back to safety just fine. I think that in order to successfully change this so it's not more popular, you would need to change the Arc 3.0 subclass abilities somehow. I would almost argue that maybe reduce the amount of invisibility time you have, because I think on even a basic finish, even on a basic powered melee kill against a thrall or a drag or something, you get 7 seconds of invis. I would reduce that down to 5 seconds, because every other subclass, if you're playing on, for example, an Arc Titan, and you get Void invisibility, you only get it for 5 seconds. Okay, if a hunter, smoke bombs you, you get it for 5 seconds. I think actually, hold on, I think with Trapper's Ambush you might get it for 7. But yeah, that's what I would say is realistically the only change you could potentially make to this to bring it in line. But I do think that once we see Strand come out, and once things kind of regulate between Arc and all the other subclasses, you'll see a drop in this helmet's usage, because there are better options in high level content, such as Void, Hunter, and the Tether, and Omnioculus, which we'll talk about in a minute, stuff like that. But yeah, I think that's realistically, this is an issue that as soon as Arc 3.0 not dies out, but kind of loses its popularity, this helmet will start to disappear. But I think that its perk here is really, I think it's really fine. I think it's okay. I think if I had to change anything about the perk, it would just be reduce the duration of the invisibility. But let's move on to Mask of Bakras. Okay, Mask of Bakras. Light Shift replaces your Stasis subclass dodge ability with a longer range, faster moving shift that partially cloaks you during use. After shifting, your arc weapons deal increased damage to combatants for a short time, and you deal increased damage to all slowed or frozen combatants. One thing that it does not mention here is that while the timer, which is 10 seconds, is active, your dodge does not come off cooldown. Honestly, this is a phenomenal helmet. I would really say remove the cooldown, and it would be perfect. Give it just, as soon as you can do the light shift, and then as soon as you light shift, it just instantly starts generating your dodge ability back. Maybe that's too much. Maybe it is. I don't, we'd have to get into into the game and see. But this is a very fun exotic helmet. That's a very fun exotic helmet. I'd definitely say it's more of a PvP exotic than a PvE one, because I think for PvE the increased damage that the arc weapons deal is only like 20%, which it's not nothing, but it's not I wouldn't say it's insanely good. And I don't think you see this in PvE very often, because 10 seconds of increased arc damage it's not I don't know, there's better exotics. 10 seconds of increased arc damage at 20%. I mean, you're already getting 25% from a well or bubble, or if somebody hits you with Lumina, you're getting 35%. So I don't think this is super optimal. I think the cooldown at being at I think at minimum now like 24 to 26 seconds is a very long time. And I think that if Bungie removed that timer and just to play test it, just see how it was for a week in game, I think would be a good start to change. I think that if you don't want to do that, the arc weapons need to deal a lot more damage. In the Crucible we're talking, because I think in the Crucible it's only 10%, which is pretty standard. I think in Crucible 20%, and then in PvE it needs 35%, just like Lumina. 35% more damage with arc weapons would be very, very appropriate for this, because you cannot spam this. And I think that's the reason why they made it the way they did, is because they were afraid that players would be able to spam the heck out of it. So yeah, that is Mask of Bacchus. I would say just remove the either number 1, remove the cooldown, or number 2, increase the amount of arc damage weapon or arc weapon damage that it deals. And yeah, that's it for that one. Okay, on to Blight Ranger. Again, this is one of the most forgettable exotics in game. I do not have it, unfortunately, because I've never, as soon as I saw the reviews on it, never decided to get it. Voltaic Mirror. Attacks you redirect with your Arc Staff deal massively increased damage and generate orbs of power for your allies. Guarding with your Arc Staff does not consume extra super energy. Now, the big thing here, of course, this is, once again, a super base exotic. And if I'm being quite honest, it's a super base exotic that has to deal directly with blocking. Raiju's harness is infinitely better than this. All right, let's get that right. Like if you're gonna use Arc Staff for blocking, Raiju's harness infinitely better than this exotic here. First of all, attacks you redirect with your Arc Staff deal massively increased damage and generate orbs of power for your allies. The idea of massively increased damage is not at all what it's like. It's not at all massively increased damage. Like whenever I hear massively increased damage, I'm thinking like 10 times damage. Okay, I'm thinking like, okay, like if a Boober Knight is gonna shoot me in a Grandmaster Nightfall, if I block it back, it's gonna kill that knight, or it's gonna, damage him to 25% health, something like that. And it doesn't do that. Okay, it doesn't do that. It is laughably bad in PvE. In PvP, of course, yes, it's very cool to block with your Arc Staff, but on the same regard, like, how often are you going to be blocking damage and getting kills? I think at the bare minimum, this exotic would need additional projectile tracking, similar to something like Arthurus Embrace with the throwing knife. Make that thing track like a hound looking for prey. Okay, make it so that, if you're using that and somebody snipes you, that sniper shot is going to kill them. It's gonna bounce back and reconnect with them. Not, oh, it has a decent chance. Oh, you have to be aiming. Like, no. Like, it needs to bounce back and hit them. Yeah, the generated orbs of power, that's a nice bonus, but especially since currently this can only produce 5 orbs, or I'm sorry, Arc Staff can only produce 5 orbs of power. It's really not worth it. Next season, of course, it'll be 7, but still, I don't think it's worth it. And then guarding with your Arc Staff does not consume extra super energy. That's a nice little feature. Definitely not gonna lie, that's a nice feature. What else can we do to change this, though? Of course, we've talked about it before. Super base exotics need some type of neutral game assistance. So what I would say, I think a fun thing to have happen is Voltaic Mirror also grants a reflective shield while using Tempest Strike, right? Similar to reflective vents, like when you go to slide, except for instead of like sliding, whenever you run in and use your Tempest Strike, it throws up an overshield in around you while you're up in the air. You go in, you activate it, throw yourself up in the air, you get an overshield, then you can jump out of the way, and enemies are damaged by that. I think that would be a good start for this exotic, in terms of helping it out. But I think that it also needs something else. I would say that hold on, I want to see something real quick. I want to check Tempest Strike. I want to see if Tempest Strike jolts targets. Okay, yeah, it does jolt targets. Okay, never mind. Okay. So I was gonna say Tempest Strike could jolt targets, but it already does that. I would say that also targets hit with Tempest Strike are temporarily blinded, and that would be enough of a change to potentially make this see some usage. And if you wanted to go crazy, you could also say that targets that are jolted are also blinded. Or no. enemies that are that might be too much. I was gonna say enemies that are hit with jolts are blinded, but I think that might be a bit too much. But yeah, I think that enemies that are hits with Tempest Strike should be blinded. As well as, you know, when you use Tempest Strike, you get a shield on top of it. And yeah, I mean, Blight Ranger is a very, very it's not a good exotic, and it needs a lot of rework. I don't really know how to optimally fix it. That's kind of just the best idea that I have. So yeah, that's Blight Ranger. Let's go on to young Ahamkara's Spine. Everybody's favorite Crucible exotic here. These things are very, very annoying in the Crucible, and they are very widely selected as a exotic of choice. So I think with that being said, it's only fair that they receive some kind of a, and I know that some people might not like that, but again, this is from an objective standpoint, they're very powerful. Wish Dragon Teeth increases trip mine grenade duration and blast radius. Ability damage grants trip mine energy. So basically, you throw a trip mine against a wall or something like that. It first of all, I guess one of the good things, it does have an indicator that it's an Ahamkara's trip mine. But it deals, or it lasts for longer. I think it lasts, what is it, 20 or 30 seconds, which is a ridiculously long time. And then it has an increased blast radius. The increased blast radius basically makes it so that you, no matter what you do, you can't avoid being hit by the trip mine. Of course, trip mines, regular trip mines, if you can run in front of them or slide in front of them fast enough, you won't take damage, or you'll take barely any damage. But with this exotic on, you will always take damage if you're within the blast radius. Now, ability damage grants trip mine energy. This is any type of ability damage. So when you damage them with a grenade, when you damage them with your throwing knife, it grants grenade energy or trip mine energy. Where to begin with this? First of all, I think the increased duration and blast radius are fine. I know that that's probably debatable, but I think that both of those are fine. I think where it gets questionable is the ability damage granting trip mine energy, because when you throw a trip mine, you know, they automatically scorch targets. So you're getting no longer just a chunk of it when they get hit by the initial blast, but also you're getting a buildup of tick damage over time. I think that the ability damage, I would say a change to ability kills. Instead of damage, just change to kills. Ability kills grant trip mine energy. So if you get a kill with your trip mine, you get half your energy back. If you get a kill with a throwing knife, you get half your energy back. But just dealing damage, I think, is not enough, especially because if two people walk into your trip mine, you instantly have it back. Okay. So yeah, I think that would be a fair change. Ability kills grant trip mine energy, and it would you know, it wouldn't see much of a difference in PvE content. Yeah, but I think that's the only change that I would make for this exotic. Yeah. Just instead of ability damage, it's ability kills grant trip mine energy. On to the next one, Mechaneers Trick Sleeves. Now these, of course, are very difficult because these are weapon specific. They are sidearm specific. So their perk here, Spring Loaded Mounting, increases sidearm ready and reload speed while you're critically wounded. Swapping to a sidearm increases its damage, provides a large benefit to the airborne effectiveness of sidearms. Again, S tier if you use sidearms. Not S tier if you don't use sidearms. F tier, in fact, if you don't use sidearms. The increase to sidearm ready and reload speed, perfectly fine. The critically wounded thing, honestly, I don't think anything needs to change with this. These are a weapon specific exotic. So I think that if you change too much about them, they are already not going to be that great. I would say on top of it, while you're critically wounded, swapping to a sidearm increases its damage, and it gives you damage resistance. Not a massive amount, but at least a decent amount. And I think that doing that would be fair enough to these exotics to potentially see them come back into the fray. Because I see these every now and then in the Crucible. You know, I see these people using these. I get surprised by them a lot. You know, they pull them out, start gunning you down. I think in the Crucible though, most weapons, by the time you're red bar, most weapons kill too fast even to pull out a sidearm and get kills with it. So I think that giving you some sort of damage resistance so that you can potentially, like, if you switch just in time, you can kill the enemy before you die. I think that'd be best. Or either that or change it so that instead of being critically wounded, once you hit like 50% of your shields, then it activates. And it doesn't give you as much, maybe it doesn't give you as much increased damage. But yeah, that's Mechaneers trick sleeves. Pretty difficult changes because they're weapon type specific. But yeah, I think that just either giving you additional damage resistance while you're critically wounded, or you know, if you wanted to build into this even better, while you're critically wounded, swapping to a sidearm increases its damage and grants damage resistance. So that way, you know, you're in the Crucible, because these I would say are a Crucible based exotic. When you're in the Crucible, you switch to a sidearm. If you can switch to your sidearm before you die, you get a massive damage resistance. That way, you know, you pull it out. As long as your aim is true with any class of sidearms, you can get the 4 or, you know, however many shots off it takes to get a kill before you die. Whatever the sweet spot is, I think it'd be up to Bungie to determine what the sweet spot for damage resistance is. We have that happen, but it should be one that's very quick. You know, if you don't get it in time, if you're critically wounded and you try to turn and tuck tail and run away and then switch, you won't make it. But if you have these on and you are fighting somebody and they break your shields and you switch over to your sidearm, you can kill them before they kill you. And yeah, that's it. That's the only thing I'd change about these. Okay, Aeon Swift. Of course, Aeon Swift, similar to the last two videos, you can go refer to my Titan video if you want to know the changes I would make to these. They're the exact same across all three classes, so I'm not going to cover them in all three videos. But there's just some changes to these perks right here. That's all I would do. Okay, Shinobu's Vow. New tricks. Improve skip grenade. You gain an additional skip grenade charge. Skip grenade returns energy when it damages enemies. So this is, I don't know why I don't see more of these exotics, quite frankly. They are very good. Okay, you get an improved skip grenade. The improved skip grenades are almost inescapable. Like, it's not like normal skip grenades or Axion bolts or something like that where you can run away from. No, they'll catch you. And they deal a pretty good amount of damage. You also gain an additional grenade charge, which is, again, that's never a bad thing. Specifically skip grenade charge, but still never a bad thing. And then of course skip grenades return energy when they damage enemies. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, which I don't play with these very often, but I think it can grant you 50% grenade energy back if all the skips connect. How would I change this? I think that the only thing I would change is the further a skip grenade travels to catch an enemy, the more grenade energy you get back. That way, if somebody tries to run away from your skip grenade, I mean, by the time they're 10 meters away, for example, you are getting like 25, 30%, maybe even 35% of your grenade energy back from each skip that hits them, or each little particle of the grenade that hits them. You could also have one so that the more times that the skip grenades touch the ground, it increases the amount of grenade energy that it gets back. That way, you know, it doesn't put you in a position where, oh, you want to hit enemies with your skip grenade. It's like, okay, you know, hey, I know somebody's coming up here. I'm gonna just throw a skip grenade right here. It's gonna bounce around the corner. It's gonna skip 7 or 8 times before it hits them. And by the time it skips to hit them, you got full grenade energy. Um, yeah, I think that'd be a pretty decent thing to add onto it. I think one other change, when you get kills with skip grenades, it grants additional super energy. Just to add a little bit more on top of these. But again, I don't see why these are not used as much as they could be, because I think that they're relatively decent. Maybe also increase the tracking on these to make them a lot faster. Because I know that's like if you can still run away from them, but they track pretty aggressively. But I think that's, if you're gonna throw a grenade that's with an exotic that's granting you grenade benefits, you just need you need you need those grenades to hit. So maybe just increasing the tracking, the duration too. I think increasing the duration, because I want to say that if an enemy is too far away, the skip grenades, they can potentially escape the skip grenades. I don't think you should be able to escape the skip grenades unless you're like booking it. But yeah, Shinobu's Vow. All right. Sealed Ahamkara Grasps. Okay, these exotics, of course, look absolutely fantastic, but they do not perform nearly as good as they look. Nightmare Fuel. Dealing melee damage reloads your currently equipped weapon. Provides a large benefit to the airborne effectiveness stat of all weapons for 5 seconds after dealing melee damage. The biggest issue I have with these is there are already so many ways to get reloads off and then reload enhancing perks. The only time I can see Nightmare Fuel being relatively decent is maybe if you're using a shotgun that's out of ammo. Again, most of the time, especially in high level content, you are taking a substantial step back away from the enemies. You're trying to get away from them. You're not trying to stay up close and personal all the time. So I think that that it should do additional things. And I think what better thing to do than add an additional melee charge to your subclass. That will cut into some exotics up ahead, and make some exotics a little bit irrelevant. But we'll talk about those when we get there. Yeah, dealing melee damage, reload your equipped weapon. That's fine. Definitely keep that on there. Give it an additional melee charge. And I would almost say give it some type of additional effect. I would say, for example, like if you have a charged melee and you hit an enemy with stasis, for example, it applies more stacks of slow. If you are on void and you throw a smoke grenade at an enemy, it's, it weakens them like it normally does, but then it also, it maybe doubles the duration of the weaken effect once the smoke is gone. An arc, arc will arc will jolt enemies. Yeah, arc will jolt enemies, and it will the jolt will actually last longer, and add a new effect. It will also electrify enemies so that they're constantly taking shock damage and reproccing jolt on their own. Solar, you throw a throwing knife and it deals enough. I don't know, it deals more scorch test. I don't know, something along those lines. Again, these are one of those exotics that they are so laughably bad that you almost don't know what can make them better. And I definitely feel that way about these. I think a last thing, increase the melee damage. Just a flat melee damage increase would be great for these. Instead of 35% additional melee damage. Or even better yet, actually scratch what I said earlier about the crap, I can't remember the name. Scratch what I said earlier about the, scorch and other negative effects of the other subclasses. Instead, when you melee an enemy, it gives you the the keywords that help you. So for example, if you are playing on Hunter and you throw a throwing knife and you hit an enemy with a throwing knife, it automatically gives you restoration, even if you don't get a kill. If you are on Arc, it will amplify you, even if you don't have an aspect or fragment or whatever to amplify you. It'll amplify you. Stasis will. I think stasis should give you. Hell, with stasis, let it give you a damage or not a damage, a small overshield. And then with void, you melee an enemy with void, or aka hit him with a smoke grenade, grants invisibility. If you throw a smoke grenade and the smoke hits somebody, you're automatically turned invisible. Just something like that to improve the efficacy of this exotic, because it's so laughably bad. And the last thing, it's definitely need a much longer airborne effectiveness. I would say at least minimum 10 seconds of a large benefit to airborne effectiveness stat of all melee weapons after dealing melee damage. Because here's the thing, in order to hit an enemy with melee anyways, you have to be on the ground. So you punch for 5 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, blah, blah, blah. You have to get up in the air and find your next target. And I think that's just, especially if you're in the cruise when you punch somebody and do that, you're already close enough and they've already taken enough damage. You don't need additional airborne effectiveness to finish them off. But yeah, those are a lot of ideas there. I think the ones I'm settling on, number one, dealing melee damage grants whatever subclass specific buffs to your character. And I would say not even a charge melee, just any melee. Okay, and yes, maybe that's broken. Sure, maybe it is, maybe it's not. But give them the positive buffs that are associated with those subclasses. And I think with stasis, what would stasis be? Because I don't know if stasis has any bonuses other than other than an overshield. So yeah, just maybe give it an overshield, a small overshield, not very strong, not like a 50% damage reduction, but maybe like basically an additional 10% health, maybe 20% health upon dealing melee damage. And you know what? Just to be safe, give it a cooldown. So if you're constantly meleeing something, you can't get it over and over again. If you're constantly meleeing something, proccing invisibility or restoration, whatever it is, every other melee. I think that would be a good change. And of course, changing this from 5 seconds to 10 seconds at minimum would bring these back up. And of course, keeping their original perk here that reloads your currently equipped weapons. But yeah, that is sealed Ahamkara's grasps. Let's go on to where were we? Shards of Gallon. So Shards of Gallon, again, the issue that plagues these is that they are very, very super based exotics. They are based around using your super, and we need something to help that. Hits and kills with Blade Barrage will return super energy after the super ends. These, of course, used to be insane in the Crucible, because you'd literally get like almost your entire super back if you got 2 or 3 kills. They've since been reined in a little bit. But how would I go about changing these? First of all, leave the perk as it is. I think it's fine. I definitely think that it's just fine. I think it needs to play into some type of throwing knife style of play. That's more than just throwing knives give you super energy. Throwing knife kills give you super energy. Perhaps I don't know. I think I haven't really thought about this, and I actually forgot these existed. Maybe you could do something along the lines of throwing knife kills grant orbs of power. I know I just said need something more than just throwing knife kills blah blah blah, but maybe throwing knife kills grants restoration as well. Additional super energy and restoration. I think that could potentially help these come back into the fray. I think also granting additional armor while using Blade Barrage would be another wonderful idea for these. And you know what? Actually, or actually maybe not and, but or when you hit, the more targets you hit with your Blade Barrage, you actually gain an overshield, based on the number of hits you get as well. Yeah. I think that's a good one. So number one, obviously hits and kills Blade Barrage, returns super energy, and grants an overshield. The amount of blades that hits an enemy increases the duration and strength of the overshield. You know, so if you're in the Crucible and you solo super somebody, you get maybe like 1/3 of an overshield, and it only gives you like 10% extra health in total, basically, or 10% damage resistance. But if you go up and you wipe, 4 or 5 people, number one, you'll get 80% of your Blade Barrage back, but number two, you'll get a full overshield that lasts for 15-20 seconds, for example. And I think that could potentially help it a lot. And then I also think that having some sort of, throwing knife kills grants whatever, or make it specific, make it to a specific, like weighted knife kills, or knife trick, for example. Knife trick kills grant additional super energy. I don't know, something like that I think would be good. But that's Shards of Gallon. Let's go on to Oathkeeper. Oathkeeper, again, these are so difficult because these benefit a specific weapon type, which is bows. Bow charge can be held indefinitely. It provides moderate benefit to the airborne effect and stat of bows. I don't see any reason to change these. If you use bows, these are absolutely cracked. If you don't use bows, they're completely useless. I would say just the only thing I'd add on to this is give bows a faster knock speed, and that's it. That's the only thing I'd change about these. Yeah, they help a specific thing, and really, if you're using an exotic bow, like if you're using Lemon Arc, Lemon Arc is already insanely good in the Crucible. These can make it tremendously better because you can sit there and lane and still get that massive poison damage off. And basically as soon as somebody walks around the corner, you've got a massive high damage shot ready to go that weakens or poisons them, stuff like that. So I think they're really strong. Actually, I would change one thing. I would change the moderate benefits to a large benefits. That way, if you're going to commit to these exotics, you need to be able to use bows in the air. So I think bows really suffer in the air because it's not like a hand cannon where, you can miss one shot, but then your next shot hits. If you miss a bow shot while in the air, you can't pull back another one before you have to, go to the ground again. So yeah, provide a large benefits to the airborne effectiveness stat of bows. And give bows a faster knock speed. Oh, and then you know what else? Also, give bows a faster stow and draw time. That way you can whip out a bow really fast. And then, hell, you know what? Give it snapshots too. Just if you're gonna commit to bows, you might as well give it snapshots. Give it faster ready and stow speed. Hold the charge indefinitely, and then give it a large airborne effectiveness stat. That's the only thing I'd change about Oathkeeper. Let's go to the next one. Liar's Handshake. Okay, Liar's Handshake. Using your arc melee ability or being hit by a melee attack will allow you to follow up with an extremely powerful counterpunch that will heal you. Liar's Handshake is a very strong exotic. Liar's Handshake, we've done some builds in the past before where we run around in the Crucible and get right up in somebody's grill. That way when they punch us, we instantly punch them back and they die instantly. These exotics, I think that they see a decent amount of usage. I do see somebody running around with them, in the Crucible. Not every single game, but I would say probably every 2 or 3 games I'll see somebody on my team or the enemy team using Liar's Handshake. I think that they're really strong. Using your arc melee ability, of course, if you have an arc melee ability, you're gonna one punch somebody in the Crucible, which is very, very strong, especially with Gambler's Dodge, Gambler's Dodge, where you can get your melee back instantly and then get your dodge back instantly. And then also being hit with a melee attack again, like if somebody punches you, you come back and kill them in one hit. That's super strong. I don't know how I would change these, because obviously number one, I think these are more of a PvP exotic than a PvE exotic. I think in PvE they're in a really good spot because they deal massive damage. I think it's like 3 times damage or something like that, which is, again, pretty good in PvE. I would say it could be strong. You could deal 7.5 times damage, but not looking at you, Winter's Guile and Worm God's Caress. But the I don't know. I think these are in a pretty decent spot. Maybe just giving them some type of airborne effectiveness increasing thing would help. You know, a small airborne effectiveness stats all weapons would help these out. But I think that these are in a pretty good spot. I think that what makes these not so good is that there are other stronger options. So if we nerf the other options, I think these will be in kind of a good spot. I would just, like I said, I would just add the add airborne effectiveness, small airborne effectiveness stat to all weapons. All right, on to the next one. Kestrels Sting. Do not see these hardly ever in any gameplay. Their exotic perk, Touch of Venom. Punching someone with full melee energy will instantly cast Smoke Bomb. Gain True Sight while in your own Smoke Bomb, and your Smoke Bomb deals increased damage. Okay. So, number one, I think one of the biggest issues with this exotic is this is one that it's like, oh, they kind of want you to punch somebody to stun them. You punch them and then do the little hunter thing where you jump up in the air out of the way. Unfortunately, while somebody is in smoke, they still have melee tracking. I think that with this exotic equipped, when you punch somebody, it should be similar to a Titan shoulder charge, where for like a split second, they can't melee back. Like they don't have melee tracking to hit you back. That way you can punch somebody, you can dodge backward, you can jump up out of the way, and they can't punch you back. The True Sight when your own Smoke Bomb effect, it's not bad. Smoke Bomb deals increased damage. I think the damage should just be increased even further. And I think that also the Smoke Bomb should last longer. They currently last like 3 seconds or something, or like 2 or 3 seconds, which is absolutely nothing. I think that when you throw a Smoke Bomb down, say a Snare Bomb especially, you don't get that benefit of True Sight because you can't pop it. So when you throw a Smoke Bomb down, it stays persistent for longer in the world. And then if an enemy does walk into it, it's like maybe like a 7-second Smoke Bomb, like smoke screen. Yeah, maybe even 10 seconds. I would almost argue that would be better for these exotic is 10 seconds. That way it turns these into somewhat of an area denial style of exotic. Let's see here. I think that's all I would change. Of course, I think I think a lot of people be concerned with the 10 seconds of a Smoke Bomb and having True Sight for that long. But at the same time, your melee does not come back as quick as, a dodge or something like that. Like it's got, even at max strength, it's got a 30-second cooldown, So I think it would be okay. And if you wanted to, you only get True Sight for half that time. You throw a Smoke Bomb at the ground, you shoot it so it pops. It makes the smoke for 5 seconds. You get True Sight. You can see where enemies are. I think that would help this exotic a lot. And like I said, especially the when you melees, when somebody's hit with smoke, they can't, as long as they're, for the duration they're in the smoke, they cannot melee lunge. And then Smoke Bombs deal increased damage. I think that the duration and the damage should be long enough so that if somebody stays in your Smoke Bomb the entire time, they should die from it. That's my thoughts. But yeah, that's Kestrels Sting. Those changes hopefully will happen someday and bring it back into the fold. Let's go take a look at Athros Embrace. All right, Athros Embrace. Skittering Stinger. Weighted Knife gains a second bounce. Rapid precision hits with your weapon grant Weighted Knife a significant damage bonus and the ability to stun unshielded combatants for a short time. Empowered Weighted Knife is strong against unstoppable champions. These are, they have PvE and PvP utility. Let's start with the PvP side of things. Weighted Knife gains a second bounce, and rapid precision hits with your weapon grant Weighted Knife a significant damage bonus. In the Crucible, these things, if you have Weighted Knife active, they turn your freaking knife into a heat-seeking missile. It seems like it is almost more difficult to miss a target if you're throwing it in their direction than it is to hit them. While the Weighted Knife, or the empowered Weighted Knife, sorry, is active. In terms of changes, I don't think that this needs too much change. It's strong against unstoppable champions, which is very, very good in high level PvP activities. You have, especially bring in Monte Carlo, and then Monte Carlo is just like an amplifier. Like, you can use anything, but Monte Carlo quickly hit 5 shots on an unstoppable champion, throw a knife to damage him, finish out your magazine, you have your melee back. But even without it, I mean, the Weighted Knife is very, very strong, and the ability to stagger unstoppable champions is incredibly good. I think where this probably needs help, I don't know. I think this one honestly is probably pretty good where it is, because when you encounter somebody who's using this, they, Weighted Knife activates, empowered Weighted Knife activates for 30 seconds. They get 1 kill, and they basically get another free kill on you, because these are so good. The tracking is so good. I don't know if I would really change any of these at all. Actually, no. The only change I think I would potentially make is give Weighted Knife a second charge, which I know probably sounds incredibly busted, but again, I think that that'd be fine. I think that Skittering Stinger, adding an additional Weighted Knife would be a pretty okay change to make to these, but we just have to see. And that's Athros Embrace. Renewal Grasps. Okay, so at one point, when these first came out with Witch Queen, they were the absolute go-to exotic in the Crucible, because of Depths of Duskfield. Your Duskfield grenades have a much larger effect radius. Allies inside the Duskfield take reduced damage, and targets inside the area deal reduced damage. Okay, so there's also an additional aspect of these that is not mentioned, and that is the fact that when you have these equipped, Duskfields automatically have the cooldown of a Glacier Grenade, which is insanely long and, quite frankly, kind of ridiculous in my opinion. However, I do understand why, because these are completely busted. You could pair these with what's it called, a Touch of Winter, for an absolutely massive area of effect. And if you're in the Duskfield and the enemy who threw it is also in the Duskfield, there's no way you can kill them. You dealing reduced damage, they are dealing increased damage. It makes for a rough situation. But how would I change this? Because these just don't see very much play. I think that a pretty fair way to potentially change these, revert the cooldown changes. Okay, revert the cooldown changes. However, as long as the Duskfield is up and present in the game, the grenade does not recharge. That would increase, it would still increase the duration that you can get a Duskfield, but it would not destroy it. Okay, because I think the big thing is dust fields could cool down super quickly in the past, without, or they can still cool down super quickly as long as you don't have this exotic equipped. But yeah, it's they took a major hit here. And then other than that, I would say to balance that out, targets inside the area deal reduced. Just take out the targets inside the area dealing reduced damage. Turn this grenade into basically a support grenade. And I think that would be a fair place to bring these back into the meta, but not make them too deadly, not make them too overwhelming. So yeah, I think that's pretty good change. So one more time, changes to the dust field. Dust field, the cooldown changes are reverted, so dust fields cool down at their normal cooldown. However, they do not come off cooldown until the actual like circle of the dust field is gone. The sphere, sorry, of the dust field is gone, and then remove the targets take reduced damage while inside of the. Or no, remove this last one here where targets deal reduced damage while inside the area of effects. And I think these would be fine. Let's go on to Caliban's Hand. Caliban's Hand, some of the newer exotics here. Roastum. Your proximity knife scorches targets it damages with its explosions or ignites targets on final blows. After throwing a proximity knife, you gain increased melee regeneration until the knife explodes. Okay. To be honest, I think these are perfectly fine where they are. These have a very strong effect in both PvE and PvP. I don't think anything needs to change about them. I see these a pretty fair amount in PvP. I have used these in PvE, and they are incredibly powerful. You can absolutely destroy the entire battlefield with these. Maybe the only change I'd make to bring him better, and I know it's pretty basic, and I've said it multiple times, but give it an additional proximity knife charge would help it out. Then you could double down, throw 2 proximities, ignite a target. And yeah, that's the only change I'd make for Caliban's Hand. I think that Caliban's Hand are really in a decent spot. All right, Raiden Flux, another super only base exotic. Synapse Junctions. Quick successive attacks with Arc Staff increase its damage output and duration. This is a pretty good exotic. One of the reasons you don't see it more right now is because Arc Staff is not used very widely in PvE or PvP really either. I think once we see some changes to supers, this might come back into the fold more. However, one change that needs to happen, of course, we need to add some type of neutral game enhancer to benefit this exotic. And I almost feel like this should give you a pseudo. I think Synapse Junctions should also work with your melee. I think it should synergize with Lethal Current and the other fragment, not Tempest Strike. I can't remember the name. Flow State. Flow State and Lethal Current. That way, not only do you get combination blow stacks, but you also get, Synapse Junction stacks, which grants, an additional at 3 stacks, an additional 15% more damage on top of it. But I think that would help it tremendously, because I mean, shoot, you'd probably see people using it a lot more, because who doesn't love an additional 15% damage on top of already like a triple damage boost or something like that. I don't know exactly what combination blow is, but I know combination blow really improves your melee damage. So why not have this exotic, build into that as well? It's already talking about quick attacks, increasing damage and output. Why not do that with the standard melee? Just not to the same degree, only 15%, maybe 20%, depending on, certain things. But yeah, I think that would be a fair change for this, you know, to bring it up into the fold, to bring it into something that people actually want to use a substantial amount and stuff. So yeah, that's Raiden Flux. Let's go to the next page. We are now on page number 2, and we've got Lucky Raspberry to start with here. Probability Matrix increases the chaining capabilities of Arc Bolt Grenade and has a chance to recharge it each time it deals damage. A full chain always recharges Arc Bolt Grenade. So I think the issue with these Arc Bolt Grenades aren't really that good. I think that these should amplify the damage of Arc Bolt Grenades. And the distance. It says increased chaining capabilities. I don't know if that means it just allows it to chain more, or if it has longer range. I doubt that it has anything to do with damage, but I think that if these got a damage boost, and then maybe a distance, you know, increase, you know, make it so that it can reach 20 meters, something like Dune Marchers, you know, Dune Marchers level of chaining, more damage. And yeah, I think that this would be in a better spot than it currently is. And of course, next season, when we get champion stunning capabilities, we may see this, you know, potentially come back into the fold as an ad clear slash champion stunning exotic. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. A full change always recharges. I would say it needs a rework. I would say instead of a chance to recharge the full grenade each time it deals damage, I would say every time it chains damage, it gives you 25% of your super. That way, if you hit 4 chains, you're guaranteed to get your super, or not your super, I'm sorry, your arc grenade back. And I think it needs just one other thing to help it out in PvE. I don't know what it is. I would say with this, Arc Bolt Grenade also jolts targets. Add the ability to jolt targets, and I think this would be in a really good spot. So yeah, I think that changing the chance to recharge to a flat every time it chains, it gives 20% grenade energy back. Increase the range of the chains, increase the damage of the chains, and jolt enemies. Which, hold on, let me read about the Arc Bolt Grenade, because I don't think the Arc Bolt Grenade jolts enemies, right? Yeah, it doesn't say anything about jolting, so give it the ability to jolt for free. That way players don't have to equip where is it? There you go. That way you don't have to equip Spark a Shock. You just get that for free when using the Lucky Raspberry. But yeah, that's Lucky Raspberry. That's the changes I think that I'd make to it, and I think that you'd find it in a really good spot if you did that. On to the next one, the Dragon's Shadow. Wraith Metal Mail. Dodging reloads all weapons and increase both movement and weapon handling speeds for a brief time. This, in my opinion, needs no change. No change at all. It is very good. It's a PvP based exotic. It doesn't need anything. I think that if you change it in some way, shape, or form, you would potentially make it busted. So yeah, Dragon Shadow doesn't need any changes. It's very, very good where it is, and it caters to a very certain playstyle. If you are a player that is number one, very good, number two, you play aggressively, this perk is going to help you out. If you don't play like that, though, it's not going to help you. It's not going to help you be passive. Like it's definitely an aggressive exotic. So yeah, I wouldn't make any changes to Dragon Shadow. I think it's good where it is. Ophidius Spade. Okay, here we go. Grants 2 knives per charge. This sounds a little bit misleading. What it should say is it grants an additional throwing knife charge, because it sounds like it grants 2. So it sounds like, okay, when I throw a knife, it's going to throw 2 knives. Does not do that. This is one, I kind of made a reference to it earlier. when we were talking about double knife charges. This is one, its simplicity is nice, but it needs more. It needs so much more. And I think that a crazy way to potentially do this is you double your knives, okay? And what do I mean by that? I mean, literally, it says grants 2 knives per charge. Literally, when you throw a throwing knife, it throws 2 of them. So if you have weighted knife on, it'll do this neat animation where it'll pull up both of them. Oops, sorry. Pull up both of them, throw them, something like that. With a knife trick, throw 6 flaming knives at enemies. And I think Bungie could potentially not nerf it, but potentially make this work in a way that doesn't absolutely bust the Crucible. Because of course, if you throw double weighted knives at an enemy, they're for sure gonna die, even if it's to the body. I think that Bungie could potentially find a way to balance it out, so that one knife goes where you want, the other one will go not where you want it to, I guess. But I think it still would need more than that. I think that if you wanted to make it better, take out that idea. Never mind throwing 2 knives. It just grants you 2 throwing knife charges, but those knives are thrown faster and go further. Okay, this means if you're using weighted knife, you don't have to do that little thing where you pull it out and then throw it. I mean, it's almost an instant knife straight at the enemy. Okay, still like maybe like a 0.1 second charge up time or something like that, but I think that increasing the speed at which you throw knives, and then I also think that killing an enemy with a knife, hitting an enemy with a knife grants throwing knife energy, and then killing an enemy with a knife, even if it's not a precision kill, will grant the knife charge back. I would even say you could fashion it so that each type of throwing knife gets a different effect. The weighted throwing knife is thrown substantially faster. The the knife trick has 3 more knives thrown into its fray. The lightweight knife travels almost instantly, and then proximity knife. I don't know what to do about proximity knife, but proximity knife could do something as well. I think that would be pretty cool. And then maybe if you did something like that, you take out the double knife charges. But then, like I said, when enemies are killed with a knife, regardless of whether it is precision damage or not, you get the knife back instantly. And I think that you could really see these back in the meta. You could see these potentially become, see this exotic become viable again. And fill a more unique role. And I think that's the important thing, is fill a unique role. I think that if they did that with the with the weighted knife, throwing it faster, you'd see this pop up in the Crucible a lot, because people would love the ability to not have to twist the knife in their hand and then throw it. They just pick it up and throw it. Still a slight cooldown. It's not an instant throw. But yeah, I think that'd be a good change for a Phidias Faith. All right, let's go to the 6 Coyote. So simple, it's so elegant. I would not change a thing about it. Double dodge, gain a second dodge charge. I wouldn't change a thing about it because this is already incredibly good in PvE and PvP. It's fantastic, quite frankly. But honestly, I don't know how you would change it. It sees a fair amount of usage. My cat's sitting over there. It sees a fair amount of usage in its current state. Okay, and the usage that it sees, I mean, the dodge already is, helps amplify the hunter. Void Hunter, when they dodge, can go invisible. Solar Hunter can, get radiance. There's all kinds of stuff that the subclasses can do that builds into this, that I don't think that anything needs to change about it. I mean, if you wanted to go absolutely crazy, you could add on that's the dodge ability cools down faster. Basically, so that when you have this on at tier 10 mobility, you would get a 10-second dodge cooldown, which would be insane. But yeah, It's a simple exotic, but it does the job and it does it perfect. Okay, on to Gwissinvest. Okay, so this was super popular back in the day. Now not so much. Roving Assassin. Each Spectral Blades kill you make before going into stealth will restore more of your super energy. This is, once again, a super based exotic, and it's based around Spectral Blades. This is a tough one because I thought about this one laying in bed last night, and I was like, what could we do to amplify Spectral Blades? Or I'm sorry, amplify the subclass revolving around Spectral Blades, which is Void. And how can we build something into, the exotic perk here, Roving Assassin? Something that identifies with the identity of the exotic itself, but that does not, break the game or anything like that. And I couldn't really think of anything. So I want to start out with the Spectral Blade kills, the current perk it has. Before going into stealth, it will restore more of your super energy. I think that what this exotic should do is they should make Spectral Blades, when you use a light attack or a heavy attack, it consumes no extra super energy. I think that would be the number one thing that they could do to make this exotic potentially better. Because of course, when you use Spectral Blades, if you do a heavy attack, it takes like 10% of your super off or something like that. Which, if you get a bunch of kills beforehand, it gives you 15% of your super, but it's not the same because you're technically only getting 5% super energy back. So you don't consume any energy. You're running around, you get a bunch of kills, you get the full effect of the 15% back to your super. Of course, Bungie needs to do their magic with diminishing returns because, of course, we don't need Spectral Blades lasting infinitely on the battlefield like we had Striker Titans in a couple or several seasons ago, but we don't want that again. But also, of course, this exotic needs some type of amplifying perk to help its neutral game. And what that could be, I think that it should I don't know. This is a difficult one. I would say it could use some sort of a rework around the flawless execution, where, for example, flawless execution, the first enemy you melee while invisible will be weakened. Maybe have it so that, when you weaken an enemy, you turn invisible. Okay, that way, you're invisible, you stab them. When you pull back, you're invisible again. And then once you defeat that weakened enemy with flawless executioner, you can just turn back invisible. Allow this to be an invisible assassin. I think that would be really the only change I could think of that you could make to this is stabbing an enemy. You know what? No, actually, I take that back. One other thing. Roving Assassin, right? Give it the old Destiny 1 backstab perk. When you are invisible, number one, when you're invisible, and when you stab an enemy from behind, you deal like 4 times damage. Okay, that way, you're in the Crucible, and you're invisible, you run behind somebody, stab in the back, they're dead instantly. I think actually that would be that'd be a really fair treatment to change this exotic to make it better. Yep. So again, one more time, when you have this exotic on, while you're in super, your attacks consume no additional super energy. That's number one. Number two, when you stab an enemy from behind while invisible, it deals 4 times more damage. And I think that would be all you need to make this exotic something that people would really prefer to use. Then, no, never mind. Well, then, I mean, technically, you could also, never mind that last part. Never mind being on Spectral Blades. If you have it on and you're using Arc, for example, and you've got ×3 combination blow, and your teammate, turns you invisible, then you can go up and attack a boss. There's synergy outside of just the Void subclass. But yeah, that is Gwissinvest. Let's go on to Raiju's Harness. All right, here we go. Mobius Conduit. Okay, so press your super button to deactivate Arc Staff early. When you deactivate it, of course, you keep up to like roughly 25% of your super. Then guarding with Arc Staff consumes energy more slowly when not attacking, and guarding does not consume extra super energy. This is basically the Blight Ranger, but better. This, of course, is a super based exotic. I would say, you know what, honestly, like, if we're being real, if we just combined this and the Blight Ranger together, you'd have a pretty solid exotic. But never mind that. The key thing here is, of course, you can turn off your super early and keep super energy, which is pretty cool. Similar to the old, what's it called, Chaos Reach subclass. Its exotic perk here is great. This is one that, you know, I have seen many people, they take off and they put on when they go to use super, so it needs something else to help it outside of super. And I would say, let's see here, guarding with Arc Staff consumes energy more slowly when not attacking, and guarding does not consume extra super energy. I would almost say that blocking damage could refund super energy. Maybe. No, I feel like that actually would be better on Blight Ranger. We might go back and have another look at Blight Ranger after this. And guarding does not consume extra super energy. This is a tough one to add extras to. And of course, like I said, it doesn't help. I don't play Hunter very often, but I think that's, you know, obviously the point of this is to play into blocking with your super. And I think that it needs to have something else on top of it. I feel like a way that you could change this for the super here is make it so that whenever you are blocking damage, it's somehow, maybe it's weakening the target or something like that, or it's buffing your allies. You know, like there's allies nearby you, get lightning chain to them, and when they have lightning chain to them, it makes them amplified, it makes them deal more damage. Something along those lines would be cool. I think one more feature you could add to it just to help it is amplify the chaining potential of Jolt. And then defeating jolted targets grants super energy. And I think that's really all you need to see this exotic used more. You know, because then you'd have people, okay, like I'm gonna use whatever, I'm gonna use Volt Shot on the Aikilo's SMG. I'm gonna use this exotic. I'm gonna be getting additional super energy, and you know what, and dodge ability too. Ability and super energy. Dodge ability and super ability energy. That way you're constantly in a state of, okay, like, you know, I've got my dodge. I am using, you know, I'm getting my super back. And I would say that on that last part there, make that not subclass specific. That way somebody could potentially use, you know, the tether, for example, with their Aikilo's SMG and get their tether back quickly. And yeah, I think that's all that Raiju's Harness would need. Again, this is a difficult one to put my finger on as to what it needs, so to speak. But let's go on to everybody's favorite, Omnioculus. Okay. Beyond the Veil, you gain a second smoke bomb charge and have damage resistance while invisible. When you make an ally invisible, they gain damage resistance while invisible, and you gain melee energy. Oh boy. So this exotic, of course, is insanely good. It is very, very popular. And I don't know how I would change it, because I don't know. This is a tough one. I would say, you know, it's widespread. I love the exotic. It's very widespread around Destiny 2 and in high level content. I would say that's probably the most you could potentially do is reduce the amount of smoke and grenade energy you get to maybe only like 80%. You get 40% per ally you turn invisible. That way, if you're running in a Grandmaster Nightfall, you can't just rely on invisibility when you have just one of these. Like, you'd have to have multiple people using them and chaining them together in order to keep the flow going. But other than that, the damage resistance is kind of fundamental to this exotic. Yeah, I think the only thing you can do is reduce the melee energy you get from 50% to 40%. That way you can't infinitely chain it together. And that's all I'd change about Omnioculus. I know probably not an exciting change, but it's very good. I don't know how else to change it. If you have any ideas, let me know in the comments. Gear Falcon's Hawk. See me, feel me. Your void weapons gain volatile rounds after you emerge from being invisible. When you are invisible and defeat a combatant while using a finisher, all of your weapons gain bonus damage. You and nearby allies gain reserve overshield and improved class ability regeneration. These reserve overshields can be deployed by using a class ability. Okay. So, this exotic recently got a major buff in the fact that it gets volatile rounds after coming out of invisibility. This is a good exotic. This is not a top tier exotic in high level content. It can be a decent exotic in high level content, but I anytime I see somebody running a Grandmaster, they're going to be using probably Omnioculus. And the last Grandmaster I did where somebody was using the Gear Falcon's Hawk instead of Omnioculus, we ended up wiping twice before I had to get off. Because they could not, you know, weapons aren't as strong. Okay, volatile still pretty strong, but weapons are not as strong as they are in just regular content. Changes I would make to this, I don't really know if I'd make any changes. As crazy as it sounds, this is a relatively new exotic, and its buff is relatively new, and I think that it's hot right now. I think once it cools off, we'll see it fall back in line as an exotic that's like, it's pretty good. Not the best, not the worst, but it's pretty good. So I'm not gonna make any recommended changes to it at this moment. And also it's a pretty cool support exotic too, which I kind of like. Lucky Pants. All right, we're finally to the boots here. Lucky Pants. This is a long one, so bear with me. Illegally modded holster. When you ready a fully loaded hand cannon that deals kinetic damage or a type of damage that matches your subclass energy type, each hit from that hand cannon increases the damage of the next shot for a short time against a combatant. Hand cannons ready faster and are more accurate immediately after swapping to them. Provides a small benefit to the airborne effectiveness stat of hand cannons while the buff is active. The only change that I would make to this exotic is right here at this last part. It says provides a small benefits to the airborne effectiveness stat of hand cannons while the buff is active. Either number one, take out this part right here while the buff is active. It just gives a flat benefit to hand cannon airborne effectiveness, or change the small to a large benefits while the buff is active, because the buff is only like 10 seconds and then it goes on a 10-second cooldown, or 10 seconds or 12 seconds, something like that. Again, this is one of those weapon specific exotics. I don't feel like changing too much in the way these would help them. It's, if you use hand cannons, they're great. If you don't use hand cannons, they're not so great. But yeah, I think that the fact that it adds the free holster mod is kind of fun. But yeah, that's it. I don't think I'd change anything other than the airborne effectiveness stuff. On to Orpheus Rig, another super base exotic. Uncanny Arrows provides ability energy for each target tethered by deadfall anchors. Mobius Quiver has an additional shot. So it says ability energy. It means super energy. As far as I'm concerned, I don't think it grants grenade, melee, or dodge ability energy for each target tethered by deadfall anchors. And then of course Mobius Quiver has an additional shot. Now I think people primarily use this with Mobius Quiver for the additional shots, which is strong. But I think that Deadfall needs a buff with these exotics, and what I would say this exotic can do is increase the duration that Deadfall is active. So currently Deadfall will stay active, as in active, not meaning it's waiting state, it's actual active state. It's currently 12 seconds. I would say increase it by a very large amount, by 66% up to 20 seconds. 20 seconds of tether time would help this exotic a lot, because it caps out, it says provides ability energy for each target tethered, caps out at 50% of your super. So you cannot infinitely chain it forever. If you shoot it into a group of enemies and enemies keep, getting tethered by it, it's going to cap at 50. And then it's going to slowly just kind of, work its way up with the recharge. However, I think it also needs some sort of additional functionality. Now for this one, I think that adding some type of champion stunning capability, and this might sound crazy, but when Deadfall is active, I think that it should, as long as a champion is is caught by the Deadfall, that champion is stunned for the full duration. Okay. This means that Unstoppables, Overloads, and Barrier champions that are hit with Deadfall are staggered for 20 seconds while they're in the tether. And I know that sounds crazy. And I know that the likelihood Bungie does that is probably very, very low. But I feel like Deadfall is such a weak super, even after the buff that it's got recently. It's such a weak super that it needs something more. And I think that giving these boots the ability to stagger all three types of champions would tremendously help. I think that's another really cool idea is allies that are within the tether radius get damage resistance too. Mobius Quiver having an additional shot, that is already incredibly powerful, because Mobius Quiver does a ton of damage. I wouldn't change anything about the Mobius Quiver aspect, but the Deadfall needs a lot of work on top of it. I think also with its perk Uncanny Arrows, I think some type of bow, related perk should also be present. And I think that this would require a little rework here, but perhaps maybe the arrows fired from your boots automatically stagger overload champions. I mean, that's, it's not much, but it's something. It is definitely something. And I feel like, and then I think bow kills should also grant additional super energy. Fill in the idea of, you're a bow hunter, basically. You've got these cool exotics on that do, a very specific and neat thing related to arrows and bows. So give bows a benefit here. Give bows the ability to, stagger overloads, for example. Because I think overload bows probably, I would argue, is one of the best overload mods there is, because it's very, very easy to hit an overload champion with a fully charged bow. And then of course all those other changes to Deadfall I think would be necessary. Increase the duration of Deadfall. Deadfall staggers all champions. And then allies are granted damage resistance while in the radius of the deadfall tether. And yeah, and then of course, obviously provides ability energy. Changes to provide super energy because that's all it does. That's just a visual change. Provides super energy for each target tethered by deadfall. And that is Orpheus Rig. Let's go on to the next one. The Stompies. Hydraulic boosters increase sprint speed, slide distance, and improves high jump, strafe jump, and triple jump. The airborne effective stat of all weapons receives a large penalty. It is a massive 50% penalty. However, I think that honestly, Stompies are fine where they are currently. They are a movement-based exotic, so I don't think much change needs to happen to them. Similar to Transversive Steps and Dune Marchers, I think it's fine. And I know it's controversial, but I think that the airborne effectiveness penalty should continue to exist on these, because the Stompies majorly improve your airborne gameplay, so that it needs to have some kind of balancing factor. And I think having that large penalty to airborne effectiveness, is fine. But yeah, I would not make any other changes to these boots. On to Gemini Jester. All right. Dodging disorients nearby enemies and temporarily removes their radar. These are obviously more of a PvP style exotic. However, I think that we could add some PvP functionality to them. So, starting off, dodging disorients nearby enemies and temporarily removes their radar. This is a wonderful perk in the Crucible, and I see Stompies quite frequently Gemini Jester. Gemini Jester frequently in the Crucible. I don't think it needs any changes for the Crucible. What I do think is that it needs some added functionality in PvE. So instead of removing radar in PvE, because enemies don't have radars in PvE, I would say that I would add a unique... No. I gotta think here. I think that disorienting and potentially weakening enemies. No, I got this actually. When you activate the dodge, it will automatically release a smoke grenade wherever you are. No matter what subclass you're using, a smoke grenade will be dropped. Okay. The idea of these, being disorients enemies and removes their radar is kind of like a disappear in smoke act. You could of course put Unvoid to pair even better with it. But I think that the main thing you could do is just have it automatically, as soon as you hit that dodge, it pops the smoke at your location and you can run away. And I think that's the only change I'd really make to these. It would disorient nearby enemies, and then of course if they're caught in the smoke, they take some damage. But its main effect would be in the Crucible. It would really hurt. It wouldn't just disorient enemies, but it would also actually be negative for them to attempt to chase you or anything like that. If you're standing in a doorway and you get bodied by a sniper, dodge backwards, the dude rushing you with a shotgun's not going to rush you with a shotgun. And I think that would really fit the hunter class perfectly, because the hunter is already a class that has so much in their kit by means of running away from a fight. I know that sounds bad, but it's kind of true. I don't think I'd change anything else about it. I think that'd be a good little feature. Again, on any subclass. Okay, onto the Frosties. Okay, rapid cooldown. Increase grenade, melee, and dodge regeneration while sprinting. Dodging increases your sprint speed. Very simple, yet very potent. Very fun exotic. I don't know how I would necessarily change these, because they do something very simple yet very specific. Okay, you get increased melee, dodge, and grenade cooldown while sprinting. while sprinting means you cannot use your abilities while you're sprinting. You can't attack while sprinting. You can't do anything while sprinting. You just have to sit there and sprint. I would also say that perhaps for rapid cooldown to be effective, you need to sprint a certain distance. And you have to maintain sprinting that certain distance. That way somebody can't just run, back and forth along a wall in their spawn to get all their stuff back. And then dodging increases your sprint speed. I don't know what that sprint speed looks like, but I would say that dodging should just make you amplified. Like if that's where they're going to go with it, just have dodging make you amplified. And yeah, I don't think Frosty's needs any other changes. I think they're pretty good where they are. Let's go to, the Bombardiers. All right, so the Bombardiers. These exotics are very, very unique. Parting Gift. Dodging leaves behind an explosive that detonates after a short delay, damaging targets around it and creating a secondary effect based on your subclass type. Arc will blind targets, Solar will scorch, Void will suppress, and Stasis will slow. I honestly think these are just fine where they are. The secondary effects are perfect. I love it. The explosion is if you're close to it, it's a lot of damage. I think if you're right on top of it, it's like 160 damage, which is massive. And if you're further away, it deals more damage than a melee does, allowing a hunter to potentially clean you up, especially if they're using Void and they can go invisible and suppress you at the same time, or stasis and slow you. But yeah, I think that the Bombardiers are really good, especially since they got this change here to synergize with subclasses. I think that they are A-okay. All right, Star Eater scales. Okay, Feast of Light. Gain additional super energy from orbs of power you pick up. While your super energy is full, picking up an orb of power overcharges your super, causing it to gain a burst of healing when cast and a bonus to your super damage. At maximum overcharge, you also gain an overshield. Okay, so with these exotics, they are not 100% based around a super, but they're like 90%. The only thing that really gets a benefit here is at maximum overcharge, you gain an overshield. What I would say is that when your super is full, picking up an orb of power grants weapon damage, a weapon damage boost, similar to absorption cells for the Mantle of Battle Harmony on the Warlock. I think that would be the only change you would need to these. Because they are incredibly strong. Okay, as a for what's it called, super, for any super, but I'm trying to think of the specific one. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen, I forget. Too easy. Anyways, for supers, they deal massive damage. Oh yeah, for Mobius Quiver, that's what I'm thinking of. For Mobius Quiver, deals huge damage. Okay. And it is absolutely insane. However, of course, since it is a super based exotic, it needs some type of functionality. So I think that when you pick up an orb of power, you just get like a 15% damage boost for like 5 seconds. And then continuing to pick up orbs of power, maybe 10 seconds, since orbs of power are a little bit more rare than they used to be. But picking up orbs of power would grant you like a 10% or a 10-second 15% damage boost to all your weapons. And then at maximum overcharge, as long as you can continue to pick up orbs, you'll maintain an overshield. It'll continuously grant you an overshield. And that's the Star Eater scales. I think that they got a nerf to the super damage they did, which is a bummer. But I would, and also I'd obviously say revert the changes to the super damage. But that's not going to happen. But yeah, I think that just giving orbs of power an additional functionality of weapon damage and then continuously granting an overshield would help these a lot in PvE activities. All right, our last one here, Radiant Dance Machines. Okay, so the dance. Activating your dodge ability while near targets allows you to dodge additional times for a short period. What is it? I think you can get off like 5 dodges, or is it 6? 5 or 6 dodges if you dodge near an enemy. I don't have these because I don't see the use behind them. Outside of maybe on stasis, but I don't know if they work with, you know, your dodge abilities. Like I don't know if you could dodge and turn invisible multiple times, or if you could, you know, dodge and reload. Like the point, the I don't see the purpose of dodging 50 times around an enemy outside of the Crucible if you're just trying to mess with somebody, you know. I don't know how I would change these. I feel like these really are a meme exotic. I don't see validity behind them. I think the only thing you can do is every time you dodge, allow them to synergize with, you know, your subclass abilities. So stasis, you can dodge 3 times around an enemy and it'll freeze them. You know, acrobats dodge, you can activate radiant, you know, 5 times around an enemy. Again, I don't know the point of that because you activate it once, you're just dodging. You can't shoot back or anything. You know, I don't know. I think these are incredibly difficult to determine a way to make them actually viable in game, because the dodging is typically meant as a means of getting away from a situation. You know, if you run out in the open and you see, oh my gosh, there's 3 enemies right there, or there's a, you know, there's a champion right there that I didn't know was there, you can dodge back behind cover. You're not even close to the enemy. Even if you are close to the enemy, oh, what are you gonna do? Dodge back 3 times? If you run out of cover, see that enemy, 1 dodge will get you back behind cover. Yeah, I just I see it being useful maybe like, okay, you know, like you dodge near an enemy, you shoot a rocket, dodge again, it reloads your rocket, dodge again, it reloads your rocket, dodge again, shoot, you know, so on and so forth. Maybe that's the one time this could be useful. But I don't know how else I would change it. I would say it should give you some type of stat boost every time you dodge. Like, you know, if you dodge 5 times, it grants you +5 resilience, +5 mobility, +5 recovery on top of whatever you have. So if you're at tier 10 mobility, you can have basically tier 15 mobility. But yeah, I think that would be kind of the only thing is every time you dodge near an enemy with the dance active, you gain an increase to some of your stats, and that's really it. That's all I can think of for Radiant Dance Machines. I have never got them because they seem, I don't want to say useless, but they don't seem incredibly useful in 90% of content. So that's Radiant Dance Machines. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, is it for our exotic hunter armor discussions and the changes I would make to them, which also brings us to the end of our mini series of changes I would make to all class specific exotic armors. Let me know, of course, what you guys think about some of these changes. I'm not gonna lie, I had a difficult time with Hunter because I don't play Hunter very often, but I know there's a lot of you out there who probably play Hunter a lot more than I do. So let me know what you think about these changes. If you would change something that I didn't mention, I would love to hear about it. I always like to hear people's ideas in the comments below, and I do read all the comments, so yeah, just keep that in mind. We might move into weapons for the next one, and talk about the weapons and the changes I would make to the weapons to make them more viable. I think weapons are a little bit more difficult though, because they all have a very specific role to meet. So we might just go through and pick some of the worst performing weapons and talk about how to change them, so that they could see more usage. But with that being said, guys, I appreciate everybody who came and watching, and I appreciate you sitting through this almost 2-hour long video discussion of all the changes that I would make to exotic armor pieces for the Hunter. If you haven't checked out the Titan and the Warlock, go check those ones out as well, because we do talk about them. And yeah, that's it for me, guys. I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and come check us out on stream at twitch.tv/thewormkeeper. Bye for now.